Polonia, 2005. What advice would I give the young? I have trouble answering this question. Here's why. Just before Christmas, I was in a cheese store purchasing some cheese when a very young man of, say, between 40 and 50 entered, manifesting bewilderment. His wife had sent him out to get something called meringue sugar, with strict instructions to buy no other kind, and he didn't know what the stuff was and couldn't find it. And nobody in any of the shops he'd so far wandered into had any idea either. He didn't say this to me. He said it to the cheese shop person. She too appeared to be without a clue as to what meringue sugar mystery. None of this was any concern of mine. I could have, should have simply pursued my own personal goal of cheese acquisition. Instead, I found myself saying, don't buy icing sugar. That isn't what your wife wants. What she probably wants is something like fruit sugar or berry sugar, which is sometimes called powdered sugar, but it isn't really powdered. It's finer grind than ordinary white sugar, though you'll have a hard time finding it at this time of the year. But really, ordinary white sugar just works fine for meringues as long as you beat it very slowly. I use it all the time myself, and it helps you add just a tiny bit of cream of tartar and maybe a half teaspoon of white vinegar. And at this point, my daughter, who had succeeded in identifying the required cheese, got me in a hammerlock and dragged me over to the cash register, where a lineup was building. The white vinegar, not the brown, I called in the closing, but I was already appalled at myself. Why had I spewed out all this unasked for advice to a complete stranger, albeit a helpless and confused one? It's an age thing. There's a hormone in the brain that kicks in when you see a young person in a state of shell shock over meringue sugar, or how to get the lids off the jars, or beet stains out of the tablecloths, or right way of dumping the bad boyfriend who should be disposed of immediately. Because as anyone with half a wit can see the man as a psychopath of which candidate is the best in the local election, or any number of other things on which you appear to yourself to have an overflowing fund of useful knowledge that may vanish from the planet unless you dish it out right and left on the spot to those in need. This hormone automatically takes over, like the hormone in a mother robin that forces her to cram worms and grubs down the gaping maws of plaintively cheeping nestlings, and reams of helpful hints unscroll off your mouth like a runway roll of toilet paper following down the stairs. You have no way of stopping this process. It just happens. It's been happening for centuries. No, for millennia. Even since we developed what is loosely called human culture, the young have been on the receiving end of instructions from their elders, whether they like it or not. Where are the best roots and berries? How do you make an arrowhead? What fishes are plentiful? Where and when? Which mushrooms are poisonous? The instructions must have taken pleasant forms. Great arrowhead. Now try it this way. Or unpleasant ones. You idiot. There's no way to skin mastodon. Do it like this. Since we've still got the same hardware as Cro-Magnon Man, or so we're told, it's merely the details that have changed, not the process. Hands up, everyone who's ever taped laundry instructions to the washer dryer for the benefit of their teenage kids. There are mountains of self help books testifying to the fact that the young, and not only the young, are fond of securing advice on every possible subject, from how to get rid of pimples to solve way of maneuvering some youth with commitment issues into marriage, to the management of colic in infants, to the making of perfect waffle, to the negotiation of an improved salary, to the purchase of rewarding retirement property, to the planning of really knockout funeral. The cookbook is one of the earliest form of self-help books. Mrs. Beeton's enormous 19th century tome, The Book of Household Management, expands the tradition and includes not only recipes but advice on everything, from how to tell a real fainting fit from a sham one, to the proper color choices of blondes and brunettes, to which topic of conversation are safe for afternoon visits. Stay away from religious controversy. The weather is always acceptable. Martha Stewart, Anne Landers, and Miss Maynors are Mrs. Beeton great granddaughters, as is Mrs. Rombor Becker of Joy of Cooking fame, and every home handywoman, interior decorator, and sex expert you've ever watched on television. Look at the shows and read the books and authors quickly, in sequence. You feel the need of some cotton wool to stuff in your ear as defense against the endless stream of what would sound like relentless finger waving, hectoring, and nagging if you hadn't chosen to let these folks in the door yourself. With how to books and self help shows, you can absorb the advice if and when you want it, but relatives and friends or acquaintances or mothers cannot be so easily opened and then closed and put back on the shelf. Over the centuries, novels and plays have given us a stock character, the old female or male. Both versions exist. Who's a valuable interfering busybody, deluging the young folk with unasked for tips on how to conduct their lives, coupled with sharp tongued criticisms when advice is not needed. Mrs. Rachel Lynde in Anne of Green Gables is a case in point. Sometimes this type of person will have a good heart, Mrs. Lynde does, although just as often he or she will be sinister, control freak, like the Queen of the Night in Mozart's the Magic Flute. But good or bad, the meddlesome busybody is seldom entirely sympathetic. Why? Because we like other people, well meaning or not, to mind their own business, not ours. Even helpful advice can be indistinguishable from bossiness when you're on the receiving end. My own mother was of the non interference school, unless it was a matter of life or death. If we children were doing something truly dangerous and she knew about it, she would stop us. Otherwise, she let us learn by experience. Less work for her, come to think about it, though there was, of course, work of self restraint. She later said that she had to leave the kitchen when I was making my first pie crust. The sight was so painful to her. I've come to appreciate the silences of my mother's, though she could always produce a condensed pill of sensible advice when asked for it. All the more puzzling, then, that I have taken to blurting out instructions to strangers in cheese stores. Perhaps I take after my father, who was relentlessly informative, though he always tempered the force of his utterances by beginning, as I'm sure you know. I went to high school at a time when students were required to learn things off by heart. This work formed part of the exam. You were expected not only to recite the set pieces out loud, but also to regurgitate them onto the page, with marks off for faults in spelling. One standard item was a speech made in Hamlet by the old court councillor Polonius to his son Laertes, who is departing for a trip to France. Here's the speech in case you may have forgotten it, as I have found I had when I tried for the total recall. Yet here, Laertes, aboard, aboard, for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There my blessing with thee, and these few precepts in thy memory. Look thou character, give thy thou no tongue, nor any unproportionate thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried. Grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatchet, unfledged comrade. Be aware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thine ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not express it in fancy, rich, not gaudy, for the apparel of proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend. And borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing season this is thee. The method is aggressive. Polonius scolds letters because he isn't on the ship yet, then holds him back with a long list of do's and don'ts, but it's all very good advice. A rational person can't disagree with any of it. Yet in every performance of Hamlet I've ever seen, Polonius is paid as a comical but tedious old pedant, and Laertes listens to him with barely concealed impatience, although he himself has just dished out a heaping plateful of his own advice to his younger sister Ophelia. Looking at objectively, Polonius can't really have been the boring idiot we're usually shown. He's chief adviser to Claudius, who's a villain, but no fool. Claudius wouldn't have kept Polonius around if the latter hadn't really been several bricks short of a load. Why, then, is the scene always played this way? One reason is that it would be boring if done straight, because advice you haven't asked for is always boring, and it's especially boring if the person giving the advice is old and you yourself are young. It's like the cartoon with the caption, "What people say, what cats hear," of the head of the cat and a voice balloon with nothing in it. The advice to the cat may be perfectly good. Don't mess with the big tomcat down the street. But the cat isn't receptive. It will follow its own counsel because that's what cats do. And that's what young people do as well, unless there's something specific they want you to tell them. Which is my way of ducking the question. What advice would I give the young? None, unless they ask for it. Or what would that happen in an ideal world? In a world I actually inhabit, I break this virtuous rule daily, since at the slightest excuse I find myself blathering on about all kinds of things due to the mother robin hormone I've already mentioned. Thus, as I'm sure you know, the most eco-friendly toilet is the Caroma. You can state your position and stick to your guns without being rude. Awnings cut down on summer heat through your windows by 70% or more. If you want to be a novelist, do back exercises daily. You'll need them later. Don't phone him. Let him phone you. Think globally, act locally. After having a baby, you lose your brain and some of your hair, but they both grow back. A stitch in time saves nine. There's a new kind of crampon you can strap onto your boots, handy on icy sidewalks. Don't stick a fork into a wall socket. If you don't clean the lint trap on the dryer, it may burst into flames. If the hair on your arm stand up in a thunderstorm, jump. Don't step into a canoe when it's pulled up on the beach. Never let anyone pour you a drink in a bar. Sometimes the only way out is through. In the northern forest, hang your food from a tree some distance from your sleeping area and don't wear perfume. This above all to thine own self be true. Eyebrow tweezers are handy for getting big wads of gallops out of bathroom sink drains. Every household should contain a wind-up flashlight. And don't forget about the little touch of vinegar for the meringues. That's the white vinegar, not the brown. However, here's the best piece of advice of all. Sometimes young people don't want advice from their elders. They don't want wish to tell into Polonia, not as such. They can do without the main body of the speech, the long checklist of instructions. But they welcome the part at the end, which is the kind benediction. Farewell, my blessing season, this is thee. They want you to see them off on their voyage, which is, after all, a voyage they have to make on their own. Maybe it will be a dangerous voyage. Maybe you'd be able to handle the danger better than they will, but you can't do it for them. You've got to stay behind, waving encouragingly, anxiously, and a little plaintively. Farewell, farewell. But they do want the goodwill from you. They want the blessing.